Hi there, wildlife lovers. Welcome to World of Wildlife, where we explore the incredible creatures and ecosystems that make up our planet. I'm Sarah. Today we have an exciting journey into the world of dinosaur birds, or cassowaries, as they're more commonly known. But before we dive in, please make sure you hit the like button, comment below with any questions or wildlife stories that you have, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, check out my social media channels for more wildlife facts, updates, and behind the scenes content. All right, let's get stuck in. Graham, thank you so much for being here. Graham runs Tropical Vets in North Queensland with several different vet locations or outlets, whatever you call them. He is someone who looks after all range of animals, from wildlife to domestic animals to farm animals as well, don't you, Graham? So a number of different animals that he's working with. So our questions can cover almost anything you like, I think. One thing that we're going to focus on a little bit is cassowaries, because Graham is pretty much known as the world's leading cassowary expert in North Queensland. So let's see if we could learn a little bit more about dinosaur birds. That sounds like a bet, I think. So thank you, Graham. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to pass you over to talk to us all about dinosaur birds.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sarah. I guess for me, I've been a vet for a while now, 29 years or so. But I actually started. So I'm born and bred in North Queensland, so I lived here my whole life. I actually lived on a farm right beside a national park, and we actually used to see them when I was a kid, just sort of wandering. Didn't back when you're a child, not necessarily everything that's so cool seems so cool when you're living right amongst it. But no, they are a cool bird. And then once I became a vet, I moved back to North Queensland and literally basically sort of got into them by accident, literally because they used to get run over very near to the clinic where I worked. And so we used to have to go and deal with these big guys that were certainly big enough to do some damage. And the interest really came from there, literally wanting to honestly either save them or in some cases just have to humanely euthanize them. And so there was no textbook about cassowaries. There was no ideas on drugs or dose rates or how to treat them and all that sort of stuff. So really over the last 20 or so years, we've developed pretty much all of those protocols around cassowaries. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I imagine. My goodness. And you've had some near misses as well.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah, they are. Some people term them the world's most dangerous bird. It's probably that title's probably a little bit overinflated. Yeah, certainly they have the weapons and the ability to hurt you, but they generally will try every other means to get away. But at times with our work, obviously we have to get close to them, and so we have the potential to do stupid things to ourselves. But these days, again, like I was talking before around the drug sort of thing, we're very attuned to their welfare for one thing, and obviously our safety and their safety. So we normally use drugs pretty well, which will basically just tranquilize them so they're easy to deal with. The little ones are a different story. We don't drug them. We grab hold of them and do what we need to do.
Yeah. So backing up a little bit with cassowaries, how many are there in North Queensland?
Yeah, the honest, true answer is we don't know, because so in the wet tropics in North Queensland, so sort of from Townsville north all the way to the Cape, about 70 to 80% of their habitat is in protected land. So it's either national park or wet tropics or state forest or crown land, where there's no roads, and maybe there's some walking tracks through parts of it, but that's where their habitat mostly is. So we extrapolate. We've done a lot of DNA transecting walks and collecting scats and all this sort of stuff over, probably the last 10 years. The number we guess is probably around 3,000 to 5,000 individual birds. We could be plus or minus 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not many. And the threats that I remember you telling me about, the threats being obviously roads and people is the major threat, right?
Yes.
In the
Yeah.
various forms that we come, and dogs as well.
Yeah. So cars, probably number one. Dogs closely followed, and then just I guess habitat. Well, habitat removal. Although Queensland, Australia has some pretty good rules around, obviously cassowary. Well, any habitat now, anything that is yeah, free living, especially rainforest, can't really be taken away anymore, which is great.
That's good. That's good. But cars and dogs. I remember being quite surprised when you told me that dogs usually come off second best if they get in touch in a fight with a cassowary.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. When you do, if you ever get to see one up close, you'll see that inner claw that they've got, which is sort of 10, 15, up to 20 centimeters long, razor sharp, pointy at the end. That's their weapon. That's what they do their damage with. And so, yeah, a dog and a cassowary, one-on-one, a cassowary will win every single time. And part of our work with our veterinary side of things is having to deal with some of those dogs that come in that are injured by cassowaries. So
You see both sides of that equation, don't you?
yeah, and I mean, in those situations, normally the dog should obviously be, secured or locked up, but these cassowaries will wander into people's backyards, and so it's sometimes a fight that can't be avoided.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, there's your dog just having a
That is
say
my
in the background. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, and cassowaries, when they're parents, they get very, very protective of their chicks, don't they?
Yeah, sure. So the dad, the male, is the main carer of the chicks, of the eggs. The female will lay the eggs. They're a bright green color. If you Google it later, you'll be amazed at the color of that egg. It's there's nothing else like it in the bird world. Big green egg. She'll lay somewhere between 3 and 6 eggs. He'll sit on those eggs for somewhere between 50 and 60 days. In that time, he won't eat. He'll literally just go down to his near a water supply, grab a drink, and go back and sit on his eggs. So he'll lose a lot of weight. And then he will then raise them from hatchlings all the way through to somewhere between 9 and 12 months. Sometimes
isn't it?
Yeah, a long time. Sometimes the female will sort of wander back through and say g'day, but rarely does she spend much time hanging around.
And I remember you showed me about the eggs, because I remember asking you about bush turkeys, because I'm sort of equating that parenting sort of process to a bush turkey, where the male also dominates that rearing process. But a bush turkey builds this enormous pile of leaves to attract their mate. And so what does a cassowary do?
Well, very boring. In fact, 90% of the time, 99% of the time, if you're walking in the rainforest, you'd walk straight past a cassowary nest, and nest is a very loose word, without even knowing it. It's literally just the tiniest of depressions, and if there's 3 sticks thrown together, he's done better than most. So it really is nothing. He will sit around them and over them, and it's amazing to see such a big bird. A male cassowary might be 50 or 60 kilos, but he can be so gentle with his foot and the way he moves them around. Like all birds, that their eggs need to be sort of rotated and moved to help in the sort of development of the embryo inside, and he does that also so gently, yet he's such a big bird. And he also, I think, going back to before, he protects those things. That's the absolute one time you don't want to meet a cassowary is when he's got eggs, or when he's got very young birds, because he's not your friend.
No. Do you feel like sharing your story about the injured cassowary?
Oh, sure. So obviously,
put yourself on the spot here.
Yeah, look, I guess, a few interesting stories, but probably the most one that still puts hairs up on the back of my neck. We had a sick bird, a bird with a very, very bad limp, actually, really nasty leg injury. But it had 3 young chicks. And over the course of, it would have been about a month, a chick disappeared, and then another chick disappeared. The fact he was down to just himself and 1 chick. And we presumed that because he wasn't able to get around, he wasn't able to show that young chick where food was. And so the other 2, we presume, actually just perished from lack of nutrition. And so we got to the point where, we want to save, absolutely the adult more important, but the chick as well, because if we just left them, they were both going to die. Which isn't something we just run around doing. We don't like to intervene with nature all of the time, but this bird was actually in an urban area, so we felt we sort of had to. Anyway, so there was a sort of it was actually like a retaining wall that was at this place, and we were at the bottom of the retaining wall, and the cassowary would come in, and we were actually feeding it. Again, something we don't recommend or condone or ever do, except when we're actually giving this bird antibiotics through food, and so it was coming every day. And so this little young chick was sitting right on the edge of the retaining wall with the big, very, very lame adult bird up on the retaining wall at about head height. And I had 3 rangers with me, and we decided, okay, well, we're going to grab this chick, because if we can grab the chick, we always worry when we sedate an adult that if we sedate the adult, the chick might run away. And so we thought, well, we'll grab the chick, because the big cassowary isn't going anywhere, and so then we'll be able to sedate him. That was the plan. And so we had a box in the back of the ute.
That could go wrong, could it?
Yeah. And I just said to the guys, I said, look, I think this cassowary is so weak, it's not going to do anything. I'll just grab the chicken. I'll run to the car. I'll put it in the back of the ute. We'll all be fine. Which is what I did. I grabbed the chick, and cassowaries, again, if you Google cassowary noises, their vocal range is extreme. From little cheepy sort of what you'd imagine a canary would make, right through to that deep boom, to the point that it actually goes subsonic, so you can feel it but you can't hear it. So that their sound is cool. And I heard all those sounds in the next 10 seconds when I grabbed that bird. The chick screamed its little brains out. As you can imagine, any small bird, any animal, when you take it away from its parent, so it screamed. I turned to go to the car, and in that moment, in the corner of my eye, I saw that cassowary that was hardly able to walk leap off the retaining wall to me, or at me, or toward me. And I ran, and I still call it my sort of Indiana Jones scene, if you remember, when he slides under the door as the door's coming, or the sort of that sliding wall's coming down. Yep. And I actually slid under the four-wheel drive with the cassowary in my hand, in my arm, and sort of jumped into the ute, all in, I don't know, a crazy amount of 3 or 4 seconds. And as I shut the door, the cassowary was looking in the window at me, very, very angry. And then I turned to look to see how the rangers were getting on, because I thought, oh, gee, they must have battled with this cassowary to keep it off me. And they had absolutely all completely disappeared like the biggest chickens in the world. And so from that day on, we changed our schemes and our ways.
Yeah, that was
anyway, all honestly, the good news out of all that is actually it all ended up well. We were able to take the chick into our rehab center. We're actually able to take the adult into the rehab center, deal with the wound, and actually let them go like a few weeks later. So it all ended up well in the end.
It all worked in the long run.
Yeah.
So you can imagine when Graham told me that story, I'm thinking this is narrative gold.
Yeah.
So that wonderful story has been adapted, and it does feature in Curious Kai Asks Why. So yeah, and what it illustrates to me, Graham, is this idea of when you're a vet, there's so many adventures you have as a vet, right?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, and I still have them every day. I was actually talking to one of our vets the other week who she's having a bit of a sort of life issues at the moment, and I said, yeah, but you can still have fun as a vet. We get to actually enjoy our lives. We get to do all sorts of stuff. I mean, I'd actually hate to be a vet living in the city. I'm sure they have fun too, but yeah, mine is still wide and varied.
Yeah. So have you got any stories from the last few weeks that have been, kind of exciting?
Oh, probably not a cassowary one, but I actually, so in my other world, I do some remote community work. So I work actually up on Cape York in Indigenous communities. And so I was up there last week, and we drove up. I normally fly, but sometimes I just like to drive. Honestly, I can't tell the rest of my work bosses that are part of my business, but I just go for the fun. And yeah, we saw there's some crocodile feeding in a little place that no one knows about, but the local farmer throws some food. Bad, don't do it, but it's all safe, very, very safe. They're actually just freshwater crocodiles. And yeah, we actually saw some Aboriginal rock art. There's a little place that's off the beaten track. You got to walk about a kilometre. That it's certainly not a touristy thing, but it's cool to see. And then yeah, work with the guys up there who they're all good fun. The local guys go bringing me these dogs from all over town, and we enjoy.
Usually domestic animals that you're working with in the Indigenous groups.
Yeah, up there it is. Although there's a lot of there's a lot of water birds up there. So this is up on the west coast of Cape York. It's a dry season, but it's been quite wet, so there's still water there. So there's a lot of water birds there. So a lot of your brolgas and your jabberoos, those huge, big Australian sort of classical water birds.
Yeah, beautiful. And tell me about the autonomy of birds. When you're looking at large birds, are they similar? Jabberoos and brolgas and cassowaries, are they've got a similar
Uh, yeah, I guess very much no. So obviously those big birds that fly, their anatomy is honestly very, very different to a cassowary.
is it?
Cassowaries don't actually even have a keel bone, that sort of central bone that your pectoral muscles or your chest muscles attach to help you lift and flap your wings. Cassowaries don't even have that. They
Oh,
have pectoral muscles that are about the size of your little finger. They
okay.
have wings, and they have all the bones and all the appendages and everything in their wings. It's just the size of a very small chicken wing. I mean, an adult female can get up to 80 to 90 kilos. And I guess we've always, I think wrongly, when you know something about behavior of cassowaries, everyone's thought, oh, it's just like a vestigial little sort of wing that doesn't do anything. But when you actually watch them in the wild and you see that wing actually has a purpose, it has very long quills on it, which can be up to sort of 30 or 40 centimeters long. Some of those, they're actually a follicle feather without any barbules on it. And when you see them walk through the rainforest, that actually helps protect them as they walk through, especially if they're walking past vines and thickets and things that can catch them. It just trickles over those wing feathers, and they continue on their way. We used to try and track these birds through the rainforest by following them, and we never had a chance because they'd just walk into the thickest jungle, and we'd still be there an hour later trying to just
Yeah.
untangle ourselves, and they'd long gone. It's so cool at what they do.
Yeah, they're amazing, aren't they? You
Yeah.
told me about another story that's actually ended up in Curious Kite as well, about how cassowaries fish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I I have yeah, I wish I could get some good footage. I've done quite a few documentaries with different random people, but it's just one of these things you're never going to get on a movie. I just wish you could. But in the dry season, which we're in now in North Queensland, and I mean dry season's a bit of a hard word for people who have true dry weather, but it rains less at this time of year for us. A lot of the creeks will start to dry up. And a lot of the water systems will get quite low. And in some points you get, in Australia we call them billabongs, where the river dries up, but you still get this stretch of water. And obviously all the water fish and little any little eels and all that sort of thing will get concentrated in those areas, and that's where all the birds will come and obviously get a feed. And cassowaries, and I've seen it once, but I've heard about it from a lot of other people. They will go down into these, especially if it's muddy and it's really sort of getting to that point that the water's really concentrated. They'll go in, they'll sit in it, they'll sort of wallow around in it, and then they'll fluff up all their feathers, and they'll get right down and deep in the water, and then they close all their feathers up, and they'll literally jump out on the dry bank and shake. And
Just
when they
like
shake, all the things that they've caught in their feathers fall out, and they turn around and they eat the lot. So
and
whether
you
it's fish or little snails or all those little critters that live in the water,
isn't
and
that amazing?
they turn around and eat them all. They're so wrongly portrayed as a fruit eater. Honestly, I think they eat fruit because they don't have much else to go on in the rainforest. But if they could eat protein all day, they absolutely would.
They would. Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah,
But talking about them and fruit, so they're
yeah,
an important part of the rainforest because of that fruit eating as well, aren't they?
yeah. So we call them. They're called the guardian of the rainforest, or the gardener of the rainforest. And so there's a few species of rainforest tree that have a big seed, like a seed almost. It's as big as your fist.
Yeah.
And there's actually nothing else in the rainforest that can eat those things other than a rat or a bandicoot or whatever have a little chew at it. But cassowaries will swallow those things whole. And we know when we see these species on the side of a hill that there's younger trees growing further up the hill. And so we know that the cassowaries pick those things up, digest partially the outside of the seed, which actually often helps with germination and that sort of stuff, and then deposits them, and they do that all over the place. There's a lot of species of rainforest tree, and I'm not a botanist by any means, but having talked to a lot of them, where the tree, the seedling will grow so much better because it's gone through a cassowary than if it's just dropped on the ground and left there to do its thing.
Awesome. So they actually fertilize it, and then leave it in a nice little pile of fertilizer in the middle of the rainforest.
Absolutely. And if you do ever get into North Queensland and go on a bushwalk, you sort of got to tune your eyes into it. But as you walk along, you'll see these little groupings of little seedlings just growing up out of the leaf litter. And obviously the scat's long since gone. It's all sort of been decomposed and gone. But when you actually train your eyes into it, you realize, hey, 3 months ago that was a cassowary scat, and now it's all these little seedlings growing up. And you'll see that in all levels, from a cassowary scat to tiny little things just growing out of it to sort of medium-sized trees, all from the result of the cassowaries. Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah, they are. They're amazing, and such an incredible, important part of the ecosystem, aren't they?
Absolutely. We sort of call them, the gardener of the rainforest. We rely on the cassowary to a point because it has got a little bit of a profile, and we literally know if we're protecting cassowary, we're actually protecting 1,000 other species in that same rainforest. Because if you're looking after the rainforest, if you're looking after the cassowary, it means you're looking after the rainforest. It means by the same token, you're looking after everything else.
You are. And because of that, partly, then they renamed your area the Cassowary Coast, right?
Yeah, they did. The Queensland government changed some sort of council boundaries a while ago, and it came up with the Cassowary Coast, which is quite apt because it is coastal, it is rainforest, and there's lots of cassowaries there. They're not necessarily looked after by the council that well, but we actually it gives us a good sort of leverage to the council sometimes when they're trying to make decisions that maybe aren't helping the environment. We can say, hey, well, you guys are actually called the Cassowary Coast, so you better start looking after them.
You've got to look after the name you've created, your market. Right. Your greenwash marketing has to be backed up.
Correct. Exactly correct.
That's awesome. Now that you just leaves me one more question, then I'll open everyone up to questions. So think of your questions while I'm going for this last one. Is you've just mentioned the coast. So we always think of cassowaries in this sort of environment, but that's not where they are. The one that you actually showed me was in a totally different environment. So talk about that.
Oh, look, cassowaries again, the marketing will tell you they live in the thick rainforest, which they do, and that's they love it there. But they will transverse over all sort of habitats. So on the beach, obviously, where we saw that one that we saw, and they'll swim. They'll go in the ocean. If they're chased by dogs, they'll escape into the ocean to get away from them. And they'll swim around. Obviously, it's hot in North Queensland in summer, so I'm sure they're just going for a dip sometimes. But then they'll be found in swamp country and sort of tea tree swamp. They'll be found in some sort of a little bit of open eucalypt at time to time if they're moving from sort of one gully rainforest across a patch into another patch. So they do get around, and they'll be found, sometimes in places we wouldn't expect. Up on Cape York, where there's just little pockets of rainforest, and that's not because of any human interaction. It's just that's what the habitat's like. They will transverse from rainforest patch to rainforest patch across sort of open ground sometimes. They don't have a lot of true predators in Australia. So once you're an adult cassowary, it's a little bit like a crocodile in the river. Once you're a big cassowary or a big crocodile, you don't have a lot of. The only things that are going to hurt you is another cassowary, and maybe that's a story for another time. Yeah.
Or maybe it is. Maybe it's a question that's going to come up. Is there anything you wanted to add that we've sort of forgotten in there?
I guess we were talking about the feathers before. Obviously, we're living in the wet tropics where it rains, and these places measure their rain in meters, not millimeters. We get 4, 5, 6 meters of rain a year, and you'll get earlier this year we had some pretty big floods here, but you'll get 800, 900 millimeters of rain in a day, and I can't imagine any animal sitting in the rainforest just copying that, but cassowaries do, and they have this unique way that they do that. When they sit, all their weight is on their feet, and on this, they've got this on their chest where I was talking before around where the keel bone was. They actually have this callus, and it's like a callus that you get on your hand or whatever that just sits there from over time from rubbing. And when they're in the mud, or what we'd think is mud because it's pouring rain. They're sitting there basically on 3 points on each leg and on this callus, and they're actually completely dry. They keep themselves above the water line. And their
Wow.
feathers, while they're not waterproof, they don't have a preen gland like ducks and things where you see, water hits a duck's back and flows off. That doesn't happen. But their feathers are so well intertwined that literally when the rain stops, they stand up, they give themselves a shake, and they're dry. And that's cool.
That's super cool. So they're very well adapted to their environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when Graham says it rains in North Queensland, what he means is it's the wettest place in Australia, and there's a bit of competition between two places, aren't there? Innisfail and Tully always are fighting for who's the wettest place in Australia, and
Yes.
that's where the cassowaries are. So yeah,
It's a crazy, sad thing to fight about, but you got to make people come to your town somehow.
it's sort of like the state of origin, isn't it? Really.
It is. It is. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, Graham, for that amazing insight into cassowaries. I'm sure that we've got some good questions. So, who wants to go first? Who's got the already? Here we go. Milani, take yourself off mute there. Off you go.
Tell the difference to a male and a female cassowary.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I would say that the average person will not be able to, maybe because they look the same. The colors are the same. They that bright blue and red with the sort of little wattles, but as you get good at sort of dealing with them and looking at them, there's a couple of ways you can tell. For one, if you've got two big adults together, the female's bigger, and she'll be normally about a third bigger, and the boy's scared of the girl, okay, because she can chase him and hurt him. That's one way. In the breeding time of the year, which is actually now, pretty much between June and September, October, the female will just get brightly coloured. Her colours will go really, they stand out, and they've got that sort of colour down their neck. But then just as before the colour gives way to the feathers, they've got this almost this sort of bubbly appearance of the flesh there, and that gets shiny. And the females always just look that little bit more intimidating, I would call it. Another way, which is a little bit subjective, and again, we get good at it because we see them all the time. As I was saying before, the male raises the chicks, and the male will sit on those eggs, and he'll pull those chicks in under him just like you see, like a chicken would do. And so when they're standing, if you have a male and a female standing, the male at the back, behind his back legs, behind his sort of back of his back, his feathers just protrude down a little bit more. And that's because he uses those are the feathers that he actually gathers his little chicks around with. And so the female, her rump sort of ends in a sort of an end point, whereas his curves down a little bit more. And really, honestly, that's the only way. And they're both a bit hard to tell. As vets, we find other ways, generally with a sedated bird and a glove and a finger up their bum. So, yeah.
That'll do too. But don't try that one at home, Milani.
No.
Awesome. Good question, Milani. Roger, you've got your hand up. What would you like to know?
Yeah, I was reading about cassowaries before I came to this session because I knew that was going to be one of the topics. And I came across a reference. It said that cassowaries only lay fertile eggs. Now, I don't think I've ever seen any reference to that for any other kind of bird, one way or the other, really.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, is it unique to cassowaries, or is it common in other birds?
I would say that's not true. Certainly, they will lay eggs that don't hatch, that don't ever develop an embryo in. So, I think science is an amazing thing, but sometimes people write stuff and other people just sort of go along with it. But I can dispute and prove that that's not true straight away. Certainly, yeah, they'll sit on eggs and two or three hatch, others won't. And we actually had a bird in once that got hit by a car, and we actually got it into the rehab center and actually laid an egg overnight. And we incubated that egg right through, and yeah, it was never fertile at any point in time. So no, not true.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Good question there, Roger. Then we've done a Mythbusters now. That's awesome. Who else has got one?
Are cassowaries are they territorial or do they share territory?
Yeah, sure. So we part of, I mean, I've done a lot of projects. We haven't got time to talk about them all, but one of them was we did quite a large GPS tracking project with adult birds. Actually, at the place where I took Sarah to see that bird, we sedated and put on a GPS tracker onto 6 adult birds. It's actually 4 males and 2 females, and we followed them for 3 months. And amazingly, yeah, once we got all the data back and could sort of really analyze it really well and get it onto a map and check it out, they have their own territory. So the males will all interact, overlap with males, and the males will all overlap with the females. That way, obviously, the whole breeding thing can happen. But they have patches that is just their own. Yet, even so, in that particular study, there was a bunch of fig trees a few kilometers away. So away from any of their habitats. And yet in that period of time, every single one of those birds left their habitat to go to that food source and back again. But they all did it at a different time, which tells me that they can communicate very well with each other. And I briefly said that they will fight. They will also generally avoid a fight. So if they're in a patch of rainforest, they will communicate and they will avoid each other. So if one knows that a cassowary is at a food source, if it's a smaller, weaker cassowary, it will avoid that cassowary until it goes, and then it'll go in and pick up the scraps. But yeah, no, they do definitely have habitat or have their own territory. Around about 5 to 10 square kilometers is what their normal cassowary will sort of traverse. Sometimes more, sometimes less.
Great question. Well done. Christine, you've got one.
Yes, thank you, Graham. So interesting. So 2 questions. What's that thing on their head, and are they related to emus?
Okay. And I'll answer the second one first. Yeah, they are definitely related to emus. They're in the ratite family of birds, and so in the ratites you have ostriches, you have emus, you have cassowaries. You also have kiwis, the little New Zealand bird. And then there's a bird called a rhea, which is in South America. And there's actually a few species of them. It's RHEA, rhea, if you want to Google that. They look like a pretty ugly emu. But yeah, that's them. So that's them. Cassowaries have a few interesting similarities to emus. Their feathers, they have one follicle that comes out of the skin, but it actually splits into 2 little barbules. And emus and cassowaries have that likeness. As far as that thing on its head, it's called a casque, CASQUE. We call it a helmet, but casque is its better name because it's not a helmet. It actually doesn't serve any particular protective function. There's a bit of debate, and has always been debate, about what it actually does. If you cut one open on a dead bird, it's not quite hollow. But it's not horn. It's got an outer structure of keratin, which is like our fingernails and that sort of stuff. But the inner part is actually quite hollow. It's got little, what we call trabecular bone, little tiny fragments of bone. But when you look at it, it actually looks a little bit like bubble wrap. It's actually little sort of tiny little bubbles in there. And so the theories have gone around that it might be a resonance chamber for sound, because they do these deep sounds that'll travel for kilometers and kilometers in the rainforest. And there's another theory going around that it's a thermoregulation type thing. It's actually keratin, so that temperature doesn't travel very well through keratin. And I think we've pretty much come to the conclusion that it's literally just I've got a big casque, therefore I'm really good looking, or I've got a big casque, therefore I'm good at fighting, you should stay away from me. So literally a bit of a status symbol in the cassowary world is actually what we think it's for.
And they don't then use that when they're fighting, like deer might use their antlers?
Absolutely not, no. It's one of those hands-on things. It's just pretty hard to do, but if you ever get the opportunity, which is hard, it's good for me because I see them all the time. You can grab hold of that thing, and it's actually not, it's actually spongy. You can actually move it with your fingers. And so an issue that they get sometimes, they get caught in pig traps or in people's backyards and things, in fences, and they'll actually do damage to that casque when they're trying to get their head through stuff. So it's not, it's a bit firm, but it's not protective in any way.
Thank you.
No worries.
And it's not super heavy either, which is good, isn't it? Because you them carrying this thing around on their head that must just be,
quite
super frog.
Yeah, quite soft, and it's there's like I say, there's that sort of bubble wrap appearance in there, so it's actually almost hollow on the inside.
Yeah. Awesome. Any more questions? How are we going? Looks like we might have completely wiped up the questions there, Graham. Well done.
Oh, that's cool.
Fantastic job there, Graham. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge there. And I want to tell everyone this is even more thank you, because there's a huge thank you, because it's actually Graham's birthday. So, yeah. So he got up early on his birthday for this. Give a round of applause for that, Graham.
Thank you. Good on you. Ta.